Good morning. My name is Carolyn and I am from Midwest Manufacturers, and I would like to welcome you to our webinar, Marketing for Manufacturers. Today's topic is marketing cybersecurity, and our presenter is Michelle Henderson. She is the founder and CEO of BadCat Digital Marketing, and I am going to turn this over to her. I just wanted to let you know if you have any questions, you're free to turn your microphone on and ask Michelle at any time, or you can submit a question in the chat. So at this time, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to her, and we will learn everything you have to teach us here. All right, here you go, Michelle.
Hello. Hi, Linda. How are you today? Good, good. Well, thanks, Carolyn. Well, we'll hope a couple of other people jump in as we get going here. But we'll get rolling right on time. And if you have any questions, drop them in chat. I'll kind of watch that. Again, my name is Michelle Henderson. I own BadCat Digital. We started in 2016 as a search agency, specializing in SEO and SEM. We're now a full service agency, operating out of St. Cloud, Minnesota, with a fantastic team of dedicated people who create websites and videos and all kinds of assets for our customers online, as well as making sure those assets get found through SEO and digital advertising. So we will get started. What we're going to talk about today is some cybersecurity stuff. And really it kind of starts with this question that I get asked all of the time, or something that we run into a lot, which is who actually owns companies' assets? And by owns, I mean who has the login rights, who has administrative rights, where are all of those things kept, and are they secure? How many people have access to them? And do people who have access to them, are they all still with the company? Are they all still current vendors of the company? That's basically what we'll talk about today. A lot of times people think about cybersecurity and they're really only thinking about one kind of cybersecurity, which is that there are bad actors out there who are targeting especially small businesses. And there absolutely are. With ransomware and all kinds of crazy stuff out there, it's all reason to have a fantastic IT partner who knows about cybersecurity and can help protect a business. What we're talking about today is actually a different kind of cybersecurity, something that a lot of people don't think about, because most of our problems with cybersecurity all have to do with us. Um, Even with all of the bad actors out there, we are our own worst enemies when it comes to cybersecurity. And that's because we often give way to our desire for things to happen quickly and conveniently, and our business need to kind of like move along and not really set up systems appropriately. This happens all the time, especially in small business, and that's what we're going to talk about. So, um, as a business owner, I am the largest vector of danger for my business, meaning that 88% of data breaches are caused by human error. I am a human, and I have administrative and ownership rights to every business asset that we have. So Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, our website, our hosting, all of our client data, all of our proprietary software, everything that we use on a daily basis, I have administrative rights to. So, if I were to be breached, or my practices are not sound with, say, passwords and two-factor identification and authentication and all of those things, then it is likely that there will be a breach because of my actions or inactions. 60% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months of a cybersecurity breach. And that happens because the costs are just astronomical. Not only is there cost of repair, there's infrastructure costs, there's all kinds of costs that come with actually solving a cybersecurity problem. Some of our clients, if they have their website breached, they don't anticipate the capital expense of having to rebuild a website in the middle of the year at a breakneck pace. So all of those things add up very fast, but there's also business disruption. You're disrupted from your current business practices, and there's PR problems and advertising problems and client problems that come from a breach. So 60% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months. Phishing through email and social media is a primary attack vector, and that's, we all get that. We've all, been asked about our car's warranty. Most lately, page administrators in Meta are getting bombarded with Facebook is going to take your page down. You violated a policy, and all of that is a phishing scam. And as an owner, you or I, in this case, am the most likely fruitful target. So there's three scenarios that we're going to talk about today, and these are all things that have actually happened to clients of ours. I'm not going to tell you who because we're not in the practice of spreading that kind of gossip, but we are going to talk about these scenarios and how, as a business, you can prevent these problems from occurring. So scenario one, to save time with your team, you turned off the two-factor authentication on your Facebook profile, which shares a password with your business bank account. You then email the password to your daughter's roommate, who's going to be your social media intern for the summer and help you manage your page. She saves the password in her phone, and resets up the two-factor authentication using her phone, and then she loses her phone at a party and doesn't think to tell you. So that's scenario number one. Scenario number two, you just don't want to deal with any of this web stuff. You just hate it, and it's all really confusing anyway. And 8 years ago, when you started your business, you hired somebody that you don't even remember his name off of Craigslist to make a website for you, and you really haven't thought about it since because it's not like it's an e-commerce website or something. He set up email and he set up your business domain, but it's all still registered with him. You never got it transferred over to your name. So now you're a manufacturer with $50 million in annual revenue and a huge, amazing reputation. And you didn't know that your top sales rep got 50% of their leads from your website, but it makes your website incredibly valuable to you and the domain incredibly important. The guy who built your website will not give you your domain back unless you pay him an astronomical amount of money because he's realized that your business is now incredibly valuable, your domain is now very valuable, and he has every right to charge you whatever he wants to give it back to you because you never got it back at the beginning. Here's another one. You don't really know how, but your interior design Instagram business's Instagram engagement is absolutely through the roof. Your new social media intern is doing very, very, very well. Um, until one day, no one can log in to your Instagram, and your chief competitor in business starts posting pictures that look really familiar, like look like your work, but with just some small changes to them, and you don't really know how they got access to that. Well, it turns out the intern was using some random free AI software to generate those social media images that they were using and gave that software access to your entire image library as part of the terms of using that software for free. So now you have lost your Instagram page because you violated Meta's copyright about using AI imagery, and a decade of your designs are all being copied and reused all over the internet because those pictures are now part of the AI's library that it can use to provide images to other people. So, yay. That is the third scenario. So let's look at each one of these one at a time and talk about how we can challenge or create less of an issue with each scenario, how we can prevent these things from happening. That's what I was looking for. Prevent these things from happening. So let's go back to scenario one. You turn off the two-factor authentication on your Facebook profile. which of course your Facebook shares a password with your business bank account because why not? And then you email the password. So let's just break this down into where all of the issues are. So turning off two-factor authentication to Meta is a mistake. Your business page should be tied to your personal profile. It needs to be owned by an individual, a personal profile. But Meta has set up a system called a business system so that your personal profile can own a business account, which then holds all of your Meta assets, your Facebook page, your Instagram page, your Facebook ad account, your WhatsApp account. All of that can be held within a business profile, so that you can retain personal ownership of that, which is required by their terms. But then you can provide individuals varying levels of access to those tools, without giving your password out to them, without sharing your ownership rights by giving your password. So all of these tools have been created so that this doesn't happen. The only reason this happens is frankly because we don't want to take the time to set up the tool, or we're confused about how to set up the tool. So, in this instance, there are all kinds of ways that a particular business, so here's the business in question, sets up a business account that owns these different ad accounts or these different pages, and then these people have access to those individual assets. And if a third party, whether it's an individual or an agency, is required to help run those things, they can get access through their business management account. So it's a super clean, really secure setup, but it does take some time to create. You have to manage the business account, set up all of the individual users, provide the individual users access to each asset that they're going to need access to, and then manage it from there. But it makes onboarding and offboarding help for social media so much simpler. And other platforms, YouTube, LinkedIn, well, YouTube's owned by Google, so that's all done with the Google setup, which is similar. But LinkedIn, even down to Reddit, are starting to adopt this platform. So this is something to make sure that is happening for your accounts. Um, oh, something got all twisted. Anyway, so if we think about the next scenario, how do we prevent this from happening? Obviously, it seems pretty obvious. You will just make sure that you get all of those logins and things right at the beginning. But the thing to remember is, what do you actually have to get from a website developer to make sure that you own your website? So just like your phone, a website is comes in parts and pieces, right? So there's the website files, which might be a part of a content management system like Squarespace, so you would need the login for that, or WordPress, you would need the login for that. They could also be hosted either within that Squarespace kingdom, so it'll be the same login for the hosting, or hosted by a third party, so you need a login for that as well. They can use what's called a content display network, or a CDN, which is a layer between the hosting and the website software, so you need a login for that. And most importantly, you need the login for your domain registration. Your domain registration is it's like your phone number for your website. And so you need logins and access and ownership of all those levels. So if you think about your cell phone and you think about how you pay for your phone, you have a phone number that you pay for, you have a service that you pay for, and you have the physical phone with the physical files on it that you own and manage and keep on your person. It's exactly the same three things for a website. You need to make sure that you have access to the domain registration, that's the phone number, the hosting, which is the service that keeps it alive, and then the files themselves, which is the software that manages or owns or runs the website. If you have logins for all of those things, then you own your site. There are some scenarios where the software may be tied to the hosting, and so you're kind of renting space in their hosting. And in that case, there's kind of a middle ground there. But that's a decision that you make when you build your website, that you're going to build it on Shopify or you're going to build it on Squarespace, and you're not going to be able to move it to a different platform or move it to different hosting. That's a choice you make when you build it. The point being that if you have access to all of those things, then you own the site. And it's the same thing with the domain registration. You own your email when you own the login to the administration of the email that can set up users and take down users. And you also own it when you own the domain registration itself. We have had a lot of clients not be able to access their domain registration for whatever reason. And a lot of it just has to do with nobody knew to get it transferred when they built it 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And so we've spent hours on the phone with like random guys in upstate New York who used to build websites 20 years ago to try and get domains returned to clients. It's a huge problem. So this is a big deal. And all of those passwords, by the way, should be set up with multi-factor or two-factor authentication, and all of them should be unique and different. Let's talk about the AI scenario. This is the one that most people are concerned with because this is a huge deal right now. Our employees are using AI to help them with their jobs, whether we have decided that they should do that, whether we have sanctioned that, whether we have vetted that software in any way, which means that, especially if they're using free tools, because they're not going to pay for their own tools to do their work, especially if they're using free tools, we've lost control over how that those softwares are being used in our business and what those softwares have access to in our systems. If people are accessing that software, if they're downloading that software on their computer or tying it into their Microsoft account or whatever it is very likely that those softwares are getting access to files in our systems in order to keep them free. That's kind of how they work. If we take a step back, we can see that this is basically how artificial intelligence works. You have a data bank or a bank of data. So in the case of OpenAI, which is Microsoft's AI, or ChatGPT or something like that, the data bank that they use is like all the text on the internet, all the pictures on the internet that aren't behind some sort of paywall and aren't behind some sort of login wall. So they're not password protected and they're not behind a paywall. This is why the New York Times is suing OpenAI, because all of their content is and their pictures are out on the internet to use. And so OpenAI has included all of the New York Times content in their database. When a person queries or generates a prompt in AI, that prompt then sorts through that data and comes back with an amalgam of that data. So pieces and bits and pieces of all of this data that may or may not be copyright protected come back in an answer to the prompt. And then the answer and how the user responds to it is then used as more data to go back into the original database. So if I ask AI, what is 2 plus 2? And AI answers 6. And I say, no, that's wrong. What is 2 plus 2? AI is learning that 2 plus 2 does not equal 6. So if it found somewhere online that 2 plus 2 equals 6, now it gets another piece of information that says that's not correct. Where that becomes less obvious but more prevalent is if you're saying something like, if you're using AI to do something like generate a social media post, and you say, I want a social media post that's themed on Thanksgiving and blah, 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 blah. And then it comes back and it uses a date, but it's last year's date for Thanksgiving and not this year's date for Thanksgiving. You can correct it and say, no, this is the right date for Thanksgiving, and it'll replace it. So it's like a big loop and cycle. What we prompt AI for adds to AI's information. That's basically what this comes out to. So, what you don't know about this is that because right now the world of AI is basically the wild, wild west, we don't know where everything is going to land or what the most popular softwares are going to be. These are the issues that are really common with AI software in our spaces. So, free accounts or free software may or may not release copyright for the output. If you can't copyright your or make intellectual property out of your social media posts, your website content, anything like that, then that's a real problem. Unidentified sources create liability. You don't know where this content is from. A really famous case is that there was a lawsuit where the attorneys actually used AI to write a brief, and it just made up case law. It just made it up. The cases weren't real, the citations weren't real, none of that were real. And so that created a huge liability because they just submitted it and then got into all kinds of trouble. In fact, I think a couple of them got disbarred. Um, Suspect software may scrape data from users without permissions or by burying permissions in terms, meaning, you know that those terms that you get when you download software and you just say accept, accept, accept and don't read it. So buried in there could be something like this software will scrape your image library to add to its database. And because it's free software, or um because that's what it takes in order to use it, people just don't read those, and so they don't understand what the software is doing in the back end of their system. Now if we are in the case of the interior design company, that is exactly what happened. So the software that their intern was using pulled from their digital asset management software or their whole database of images and added that entire database of images into their library, and we can't get that back. It's now in there, it's embedded. So if somebody were to use a prompt like that matched one of those pictures, it would use those pictures, tweaking it slightly or combining it with another to generate an answer, which is how people started posting images that looked really similar to our client's work. Login information emailed. Huge problem. Huge problem. Never email your passwords. I shouldn't have to say this anymore in 2025, but I totally do. Don't use the same password. It's called password hygiene. Do not use the same password for multiple things. Don't email passwords to anybody. In fact, as an organization, it would be really good to use password management and password managers. So action steps. Audit your setup and ensure that there's a maximum of 2 admins at every level. Ask about onboarding and offboarding before engaging a website professional, and have a full policy in your employee handbook about all of these things. Add website access, social media access to your onboarding and offboarding procedures. And then really understand that when you allow employees and vendors to use personal devices to access your tools, you have lost control over those tools. There could be vulnerabilities on those devices that you don't know about, creating vulnerability for your assets. Basic password hygiene, no emailing, limit the number of users, remove past employees and vendor access, and then manage all softwares connected with the website, as with a website, with the AI, and really start vetting the software for all of these issues. So that's basically what I had to share today. And I would happily take any questions that anybody has. Thank you.